The ruthless billionaire thought his fiancée was sick until the maid and her toddler discovered her dark secret. "Mommy, why does the pretty lady cry when nobody's watching?" Naomi Jackson froze mid-step in the hallway, a basket of freshly folded linens balanced against her hip. She looked down at her 3-year-old daughter Ava, whose wide brown eyes were fixed on the closed door at the end of the corridor, the door to Olivia Grant's private suite. Naomi's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Sweetheart," she whispered, crouching to Ava's level, adjusting the tiny pigtails she'd braided that morning before dawn. "We don't talk about the people who live here. Remember what Mama said?" Ava tilted her head, the way she always did when she was processing something too big for her small body to hold. But she wasn't sad crying, Mommy. She was laughing, but only a little, like a secret laugh. Naomi didn't have an answer for that. She rarely did when Ava spoke. Her daughter had been born, it seemed, with a radar for truth that most adults spent their entire lives trying to build and never quite managing. The Carter estate sat on 12 acres of manicured silence in Greenwich, Connecticut. To the outside world, it was a monument to quiet power. No flashy gates, no gold-plated fixtures, just clean stone and old money and the kind of gardens that made you feel like history was watching you walk through them. William Carter, the man who owned all of it, was 38 years old, self-made despite the inheritance he'd started with, and according to every financial magazine that had ever printed his face, one of the most formidable minds in private equity in the country. He was also, in Naomi's 8 months of working there, profoundly lonely. She had noticed it the way you notice a crack in a beautiful wall, not all at once, but gradually. In the way he lingered over his morning coffee longer than necessary. In the way he sometimes stood at the window of his study with his hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. In the way he lit up, genuinely and completely, whenever he visited Olivia's room, bringing soup he'd instructed the chef to prepare special, or flowers he'd apparently chosen himself because they were always slightly imperfect, slightly human. William Carter loved Olivia Grant with everything he had. That much was achingly obvious. What was less obvious, what had been quietly prickling at the back of Naomi's mind for weeks, was whether Olivia Grant loved him back. Naomi had taken this job out of desperation, and she said that plainly, without shame, because shame had nearly swallowed her whole after Marcus left. Her ex-husband had walked out when Ava was 11 months old, leaving behind a duffel bag worth of debt and a single voicemail that said simply, "I can't do this." The Carter estate had offered housing in the staff quarters, a small but clean 2-room apartment near the Eastern Wing, along with a salary that, combined with the free childcare arrangement during her shifts, meant Naomi could breathe again.
Just barely.
But breathing was enough to start.
She was good at her job.
Thorough and quiet and invisible in the way that good household staff learn to be, not because anyone demands it, but because it becomes its own form of professional dignity. She did not gossip with the other staff about William's business. She did not speculate about why the head housekeeper, Mrs. Patricia Bell, sometimes looked toward Olivia's room with an expression like swallowed vinegar. She kept her head down, her eyes forward, and her daughter's hand firmly in hers whenever Ava's curiosity threatened to pull them somewhere they didn't belong. But Ava, Lord, that child. Ava had been accompanying Naomi to work since she was 18 months old and had adapted to the mansion the way toddlers adapt to everything, completely and without self-consciousness. She called William the tall, sad man because he was, in fact, very tall, and she had apparently sensed the sadness long before anyone had named it. She called Mrs. Bell the cookie lady because Patricia kept butterscotch candies in her apron pocket and slipped them to Ava when she thought no one was looking. And she called Olivia the pretty lady, with the particular careful uncertainty of a child who already understands, instinctively, that pretty and good are not always the same thing. Naomi steered Ava gently down the corridor, away from Olivia's door. "Come on, baby. Mama's got the guest rooms to finish before lunch." "Okay," Ava agreed, slipping her small warm hand into Naomi's. Then, 3 steps later. Mommy? The pretty lady had a phone. A different one.
Pink.
Not the white one Mr. William gave her. Naomi stopped walking. She turned very slowly and looked down at her daughter. Ava was dragging one finger along the wainscoting the way she liked to do, completely unbothered, as though she hadn't just dropped a stone into still water. Where did you see that, baby? Yesterday, when you fixed your pillows and I sat by the window. She had it under the blanket. Ava glanced up. She made it go away real fast when she saw you coming, but I saw it first. Naomi stood there in the quiet hallway, linen basket heavy on her hip, her daughter's hand small in hers, and felt the first thin thread of something she did not want to pull begin to tug anyway. She thought about what Mrs. Bell had muttered last week, half to herself, over the household medication log. These prescriptions are being filled, but I've never once seen her actually take them. She thought about Olivia's voice, weak and thin whenever William was in the room, sometimes carrying through the walls at night, strong and clear and sharp, giving instructions to someone on a phone call. She thought about a secret laugh. "Come on, sweetheart," Naomi said softly, moving again. "Let's go finish our work." But something had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably, the way things shift in the moment just before everything changes. "William, I don't think I'm getting better. I'm scared." The words floated through the cracked bedroom door like smoke, delicate and suffocating at once. Naomi stood frozen in the hallway with a stack of fresh towels, knuckle raised to knock, listening without meaning to. She heard William's response, low, urgent, heartbroken. "You're going to be fine. Dr. Harmon said the new protocol. The treatments aren't working." A practiced pause. A sound shaped like a sob. "I just want to spend whatever time I have left enjoying being with you. Not in and out of clinics. Not like this." Naomi lowered her hand slowly and stepped back. In 14 months as a nursing assistant and 3 years of household work, she had learned what illness actually looked like in a human body. She knew its weight, the particular exhaustion that lived in a person's eyes even on good days, the way it changed someone's color, the involuntary wince, the realness of it that no amount of willpower could fully disguise or fully perform. Olivia Grant did not look like that. Olivia looked like a woman who slept long and ate well and made careful, strategic decisions about which symptoms to display and in whose presence. Her color was consistently good, not the tentative good of someone in recovery, but the good of someone quietly thriving. Naomi had glimpsed Olivia's unlocked tablet on the vanity once, open to photographs from what William had been told was a medically supervised rest retreat. The images showed a sun-drenched Bahamian resort, cocktails, laughter, a companion whose face was cropped deliberately from every single frame. She knocked. 3 quiet taps. "Come in," Olivia called, and the voice had already rearranged itself. Smaller, thinner, carefully reassembled. Naomi pushed the door open with her shoulder, arms full. The room was dim and beautiful, curtains drawn against the afternoon light. William sat on the edge of the bed, large hands folded between his knees, watching Olivia with his most unguarded expression, open, frightened, full of a love that had clearly built itself no exits. Olivia was arranged against silk pillows, blonde hair in artful disarray, complexion calibrated to suggest fragility without actual illness. She wore a cream robe that cost more than Naomi's monthly wages, and she watched Naomi enter with a serene, gracious attention she reserved for moments when William was watching her be gracious. "Just fresh towels for the bath, Miss Grant." "Thank you, Naomi. You're always so thoughtful." William glanced over briefly, distracted. "Could you ask Andre to send up broth? The one she likes, with the ginger?" "Of course, Mr. Carter." She moved toward the bathroom, and that was when Ava, who had slipped in silently behind her because Ava moved like a small determined ghost when curiosity took hold, crouched down near the antique vanity and tilted her head. That tilt. Naomi's stomach tightened. William had noticed Ava and was smiling, the real smile, the one that rearranged his entire face into something younger and undefended. "Well, hello there. I didn't see you sneak in." Ava looked up at him with utter gravity. "You have a sad face today." He blinked, laughed a short, surprised sound. "Do I?" "You always have a sad face indoors," she told him matter-of-factly. "Only in the garden you look different." "Ava," Naomi said gently, signaling with her eyes. But Ava had already turned back to what she'd been looking at, a small wicker basket, half tucked behind the vanity's carved leg, almost entirely hidden in shadow. Naomi followed her daughter's gaze and felt the air leave her lungs in one quiet, controlled exhale. The basket held prescription bottles. Not one or two, 7, 8, perhaps more. All standing upright. All with pharmacy labels crisp and unbroken. All, as far as Naomi could tell from a single careful glance, completely, entirely full. Not the medicine of a woman fighting for her life. The medicine of a woman constructing a story. Naomi reached down, took Ava's hand, and straightened up. "Say goodbye, sweetheart." "Goodbye, sad man," Ava told William solemnly. Then she looked at Olivia, and something in the child's small face went still and unreadable in a way that made Naomi's chest ache. "Bye, pretty lady." Olivia smiled warmly. "Goodbye, little angel." But Naomi had seen, in a single unguarded half-second before the smile, the flash of something cold move through Olivia's eyes. Not annoyance. Something more deliberate than annoyance. Calculation. They walked back down the hallway in silence. When they reached the staircase landing, Ava tugged Naomi's hand and looked up. "Mommy," she said quietly, "the pretty lady's basket had a lot of medicine. But it didn't smell like medicine. It smelled like nothing. Like it was never opened. 3 years old." Naomi looked at her daughter, this small, serious person she had made and raised alone, and felt simultaneously more frightened and more certain than she had felt about anything in a long time. Something was very wrong in this beautiful house, and she was going to have to decide what to do about it. "I'm not doing anything wrong, Daniel. I'm protecting my future." The voice came from behind the sitting room door at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. Naomi knew the time because she had been awake. Ava had woken from a nightmare, and it had taken 40 minutes of quiet singing to settle her back down. Naomi was returning the glass of water she'd brought to the small kitchen alcove near the west corridor when she heard it. She should have kept walking. Every reasonable part of her said to keep walking.
She stopped.
"She's not actually sick?" A man's voice, through the phone. Distant, tinny, audible in the night quiet. "Olivia, that's... What if someone finds out?" Olivia's laugh was low and unbothered. That secret laugh Ava had described. "No one is going to find out, Daniel. William trusts me completely. And as long as he believes I'm dying, he won't push about the prenuptial agreement. The lawyer says if we marry under these circumstances and I decline to sign, he'll be too emotionally devastated to fight it. He's that far gone."
A pause.
"And after? After we're married, I manage a miraculous recovery." Another laugh. "People beat the odds all the time. It'll be beautiful. William will be grateful. And I will have full spousal claim on everything, the estate, the funds, the portfolio. All of it." Naomi stood absolutely still in the corridor. The glass of water in her hand was cold, and she couldn't feel it. Her heart was doing something large and disorganized in her chest, but her mind had gone very quiet and very clear. She thought about William that morning at breakfast, which she'd been setting up when he came in early, before the household was properly awake. He'd been holding a small velvet box, turning it over and over in his hands, and when he noticed her he'd said, simply, "I want her last memories, or whatever time we have, to be happy." And then he'd looked embarrassed for saying it and set the box down and picked up his coffee and stared out at the garden. That man. That lonely, loving, utterly deceived man. The next morning, Naomi did something she had never done in all her months at the estate. When she went in to tidy Olivia's private sitting room, a task assigned to her because the other housemaids found Olivia difficult to work around, she looked. Not snooped, she told herself. Looked. The way you look when you already know you're going to find something, and the only question is what shape it takes. Ava was at her side, unusually quiet, sensing in the way children sense when something serious is happening around them. The sitting room was immaculate. Olivia was downstairs. Naomi had confirmed it before coming up. She worked efficiently, dusted, straightened, collected a coffee cup from the side table. And then Ava said, "Mommy, the floorboard is bumpy," and pointed to a spot near the reading chair, beside the Persian rug's corner. Naomi stood very still. Then she crouched down. The rug's edge concealed it almost entirely, but Ava's small eyes at small person height had caught what adult eyes at adult height would have walked past indefinitely. One board, barely a quarter-inch higher than its neighbors. Naomi hesitated. She thought about her job, her apartment in the East Wing, Ava's security, the paycheck that kept them fed and safe and breathing. She thought about William turning that velvet box over and over in his hands. She lifted the board. Inside was a small leather document pouch. Inside the pouch were three things: a folded letter on medical office letterhead that, upon careful reading, was not a real diagnosis, but a paid consultation summary with language coached to sound like a grave prognosis, full of strategic ambiguity, nothing that could be legally held as fraud, but everything designed to be shown to a grieving fiancé. A printed series of text messages between Olivia and someone named Dr., full of detailed instructions about timing, about the prenuptial, about a secondary account at a bank in the Cayman Islands. And a small notebook in Olivia's own rounded handwriting that cataloged, in chilling organizational detail, every staff member in the house, their weaknesses, their financial situations, their loyalties, and next to each name, a note about how that person could be used or removed. Next to Naomi's name, single mother, desperate, will comply to keep housing. Naomi sat back on her heels on the floor of Olivia's sitting room and looked at her name written in that neat, cold hand, and felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not rage, not even hurt, exactly. Grief. For the version of herself that Olivia had assessed and categorized and found manageable. Mommy, Ava had her hand. Are you okay? Yes, baby. Naomi carefully photographed each document with her phone. She replaced everything exactly as she'd found it. She pressed the floorboard back into place. She smoothed the rug corner. She stood up, took her daughter's hand, collected the coffee cup she'd come to retrieve, and walked out of the room, closing the door quietly behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall for just a moment, eyes closed. Will comply to keep housing. No, Naomi thought. Not this time. Mrs. Bell, I need to show you something. And I need you to tell me honestly what you think I should do. Patricia Bell was 61 years old and had worked for the Carter family for 19 years. She had seen William grow from a guarded, bookish 20-year-old who'd just inherited a complicated fortune into the man he was now. She had her own views on Olivia Grant. She had kept those views folded tight inside herself because it was not her place, because she had no proof, because love made good men temporarily unreachable, and she knew enough to wait. She looked at the photographs on Naomi's phone for a long time. Her expression did not change dramatically. It just settled, like a face that has finally received confirmation of what it already knew. How certain are you that these are genuine? She asked. I photographed them in place. The notebook is in her handwriting. I've seen enough of her written notes around the house to know it. The letterhead on the medical document, I looked it up last night. The doctor's name is real, but his reviews online show he's been investigated twice for providing paid medical opinions in legal proceedings. Mrs. Bell was quiet. Patricia, Naomi said, and she never used the woman's first name. This was the first time. There's a note with my name in there. She has notes on every member of staff. She knows which of us are vulnerable, and she's been planning to use that. Something shifted in Mrs. Bell's eyes. Not surprise. Something older than surprise. And William, Naomi continued, voice lower now. He thinks she's dying. He's planning to marry her without a prenuptial because he thinks fighting over finances would be cruel given her condition. She said that herself on the phone. I heard it. The head housekeeper set the phone down on the kitchen island. She pressed both palms flat against the cool marble surface. She breathed. If we go to him, she said finally, and we are wrong, even in some small detail, we lose our positions. You lose your housing. You understand that. I know. And if we don't go to him, Mrs. Bell continued, a good man marries a woman who is engineering his financial destruction, and every person in this house who she's catalogued as a vulnerability becomes a tool she can discard when she no longer needs us.
She paused.
You understand that too? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Bell looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Ava, who was sitting on the kitchen floor a few feet away, carefully arranging a set of measuring spoons in size order, content in her own small world. Your little girl found the floorboard, Mrs. Bell said. Yes. 3 years old. Yes. Something crossed the older woman's face, something that might, in better light, have been called the closest thing she had to tenderness. She's something, that child. She is, Naomi agreed, and her voice was steady, but her eyes were full. They went together. That was Mrs. Bell's decision, and Naomi was grateful for it in ways she'd spent years trying to articulate. They asked William's personal assistant for 15 minutes of his time that afternoon, explaining only that it was a household matter of some seriousness. He received them in his study at 4 o'clock, standing behind his desk in his shirt sleeves, looking mildly puzzled at the combination of his head housekeeper and his quietest maid requesting a formal meeting. What's going on? He asked. And Naomi told him. She told him everything, in order, without embellishment and without drama. She told him about Ava's observation of the second phone. She told him about the prescription bottles. She told him about what she had heard in the corridor at midnight. And she placed her own phone on his desk and showed him the photographs. She watched his face as he looked at them. She would not describe, later, what that looked like. Some things a person's face does in a private moment of devastation are not meant to be narrated. She would only say that William Carter, who was in almost every external respect a composed and self-contained man, looked for those few minutes like someone very young and very lost, and that something in her chest broke quietly on his behalf. He looked up from the phone. The notebook, he said. His voice was even. Careful. It has notes on the staff? Yes, sir. On you. A pause. Yes, sir. He looked at her for a long moment. What did it say? Naomi held his gaze. It said I was a single mother.
Desperate.
That I would comply in order to keep my housing. The quiet in the room after she said that was enormous. And yet, William said slowly, Here you are. Yes, sir. She swallowed. Here I am. William, I don't understand why you're looking at me like that. Olivia stood in the center of the sitting room, looking genuinely uncertain for the first time Naomi had ever witnessed. It was the following morning. William had spent the night making calls, to his own physician, to his legal team, to a private investigator whose number his assistant had located. He had not slept. Naomi could see it in him when she passed him in the hallway at 6 in the morning, but his posture was straight and his eyes were clear, and he had said to her simply, quietly, Thank you. Please stay close today. She had stayed. Now she stood near the sitting room door with fresh linens as her reason for being present, watching as William stood in front of the reading chair, directly above the loose floorboard, and looked at the woman he had loved. I'd like you to show me your medications, he said. The ones Dr. Harmon prescribed. A flicker. Just a flicker behind Olivia's eyes. William, I'm not sure what. Olivia. His voice was gentle and terrible all at once. Please show me your medications. She recovered beautifully. Naomi had to acknowledge the craft of it. Her eyes filled with tears on cue. Her voice became fragile. I don't understand why you're doing this. I'm not well, and you're standing here interrogating me like. I spoke with Dr. Harmon this morning, William said. At 7 a.m. He was surprised to hear from me. He was also, once I described the specific diagnosis I'd been told about, very carefully unable to confirm it.
He paused.
He did say you'd paid him for a consultation. He said the summary you requested was worded to your specifications. The tears did not fall. They stayed precisely positioned, held. And I spoke with a financial investigator, William continued, who confirmed that an account was opened in your name 8 months ago at a bank in the Cayman Islands. The same month you first told me you were sick. Silence. Olivia. His voice broke on her name, just once, just barely. I need you to tell me the truth. For a moment, just a moment, something real moved across her face.
Naomi saw it. Not remorse, exactly.
Something more complicated than remorse. The expression of a person who had built an elaborate structure and watched it finally, inescapably, begin to fall. Then it was gone. You can't prove anything, Olivia said. And her voice was different now. Neither the fragile performance nor the private sharpness Naomi had heard in the corridor. It was flat, tired. The voice of a woman who had decided that if the game was over, she would at least stop pretending to enjoy it. I'm not interested in proof right now, William said quietly. I'm standing here asking the woman I was going to marry to tell me the truth. Olivia looked at him for a long time. Then she looked around the room, at the walls, at the reading chair, at the floor. Her gaze traveled to the doorway, where Naomi stood, and stayed there for one careful, assessing moment. Your maid, she said slowly. Naomi, William said. Her name is Naomi. Olivia looked back at him. And you believe a maid over your fiancé? I believe, William said, a woman who had nothing to gain and everything to lose from telling me the truth. He was quiet. Over a woman who had everything to gain from my not knowing it. What followed was not dramatic in the end. The investigators had already gathered enough. The legal team was swift. Olivia Grant left the Carter estate 2 days later in the back of a car with 2 suitcases and the flat, closed face of a woman recalibrating. There were no raised voices. No scenes. Just the terrible, dignified quiet of a betrayal fully acknowledged and cleanly ended. William watched the car go from the window of his study. Naomi, who was changing flowers in the hallway vase nearby, did not watch him do it. Some moments belong to a person alone. It was Ava who walked, unbidden, to stand beside him at the window. She put her small hand in his without saying anything. He looked down at her. His throat moved. After a moment, he crouched down to her level, this enormous man folding himself down to fit the size of a child's comfort, and she put both arms around his neck with the generous unself-consciousness of a 3-year-old who has decided someone needs a hug and sees no reason to wait for permission. He held on. For a long moment, he simply held on. Naomi turned back to the flowers and let them have the moment, her vision blurring in a way that she blinked away quickly and practically, the way she had learned to do everything since Marcus left. She was still here, still standing, still breathing. It was enough. It had always been enough. And somehow, today, it felt like more than that. I owe you something. And I need you to let me say it properly. It was a Saturday, 3 weeks after Olivia left. William had asked Naomi to come to the study after her morning work was finished. Not through the assistant, not through Mrs. Bell. He had knocked on the door of the small East Wing apartment himself, which caused Naomi to grip the doorframe with one hand, because no one from the main house had ever knocked on that door like a person simply calling on another person. She had brought Ava, because Ava went where Naomi went, and William had said that was fine. Ava was currently sitting on the study's deep leather sofa, with a picture book Mrs. Bell had produced from some grandmother-like reserve, completely absorbed, feet not reaching the floor. William was standing. He seemed unable to quite sit. I've been trying to figure out the right words for 3 weeks, he said. I'm better with numbers than words. My assistant would tell you that's an understatement. Naomi said nothing. She waited. You risked your job, he said. Your home. Your daughter's security. You had absolutely no obligation, legal, professional, or otherwise, to bring what you found to me. The easiest thing, the safe thing, would have been to look away. He paused. Why didn't you?
She had thought about this.
She had thought about it in the pre-dawn mornings while Ava slept and the estate was quiet, and she was the only person awake in a house full of sleeping lives. Because she had your name in that notebook, Naomi said. And next to your name it said something about your trust. About how completely you trusted her and how useful that was. She looked at him steadily. You trusted her with everything. And she thought that made you foolish. A pause. It didn't make you foolish. It made you decent. And I wasn't going to watch someone use your decency against you if I could help it. William was quiet for a very long moment. She wrote that you'd comply, he said, to protect your housing. She didn't know me very well. Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, but the thing that lives next to a smile.
No, he said.
She didn't. He told her then about the changes he was making. Across the household, staff wages were being reviewed and adjusted. The housing arrangement for live-in staff was being formalized into proper documented agreements that could not be used as leverage. He had established, with his legal team, a small protected fund for household employees facing unexpected hardship, medical, family, otherwise. Mrs. Bell had been formally promoted to estate director, a title that matched what she had always done and came with the compensation that should have always accompanied it. And Ava, he said this carefully, watching Naomi's face, had apparently mentioned to Mrs. Bell that she liked the garden but wasn't allowed in it because it was for looking, not for playing. He wanted Naomi to know that the garden was not, in fact, only for looking. The groundskeeper had already been informed. There was a section near the old apple tree that was specifically, henceforth, for playing. Naomi pressed her lips together hard.
There's one more thing, William said.
He sat down finally, behind the desk, and folded his hands the way he did when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. I looked into your situation. Not intrusively, I hope. Mrs. Bell shared some general context.
He paused.
You completed most of a nursing degree before you had to stop. Financial hardship. Naomi said nothing. Her chest was very full. There's a program at Greenwich Medical, hybrid, mostly evenings and online. I'd like to cover the tuition. Full program. He held up a hand before she could speak. This is not charity. I don't do things as charity. Consider it a correction of something that should not have been interrupted. He looked at her directly. You should be a nurse, Naomi. It's obvious that you should be a nurse. The silence in the room was warm and enormous. From the sofa, Ava looked up from her book with the uncanny timing she specialized in. She looked at William, then at her mother, then back at William. Are you still sad? She asked him. He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Less than I was, he said. Ava nodded as though this was the correct answer. The garden will help, she told him wisely, and returned to her book. His laugh, real, unguarded, surprised out of him, filled the study and spilled into the hallway, and Mrs. Bell, passing by with a clipboard, paused outside the door and allowed herself a small, private smile before moving on. It did not happen all at once, the healing of that house. It happened the way real things happen, slowly, in small moments, in a steady accumulation of ordinary days that begin to feel, gradually, like something worth waking up for. William began eating breakfast without a book to hide behind. He began spending his Sunday mornings in the garden, and sometimes Ava would find him there and walk beside him with her hands clasped behind her back in unconscious imitation of him, and he would show her which plants were which, and she would give them all names he wasn't consulted on but grew to love. Naomi enrolled in the nursing program in the fall. She studied at the kitchen table in the East Wing apartment after Ava was asleep, the house quiet around her, her daughter's small chest rising and falling in the next room, and she thought sometimes, in those still night hours, about what it meant to be seen. Not as a category, not as a vulnerability, not as a managed variable in someone else's scheme. to be seen as simply, fully, irreducibly herself. She had come to this house desperate and been catalogued as such. She had stayed anyway and worked anyway and loved her child anyway and told the truth anyway because there was no version of her, regardless of what anyone wrote next to her name, that was capable of doing otherwise. And her 3-year-old daughter, with her tilted head and her radar for truth and her utter inability to walk past a secret without noticing it, had changed the entire course of a man's life by seeing what grown-up eyes had trained themselves not to look at. Small hands, Naomi thought, can move very large things. She graduated 2 years later, on a bright June morning, with Ava in the front row wearing a yellow dress and holding a handmade sign, assisted by Mrs. Bell and several tubes of glitter glue that said "That's my mommy" in enormous, imperfect, magnificent letters. William sat beside Ava. He had taken the morning off from something important, which his assistant had seemed to regard as a minor miracle. He had brought flowers, imperfect ones, as was his habit. A little wild, a little human. He handed them to Naomi after the ceremony without a speech, because he was still better with numbers than words. But he looked at her the way people look at someone who gave them something they cannot repay, and she understood everything he meant. Ava reached up and took one flower from the bunch and presented it back to him with great ceremony. "For you," she said, "because you're happy today."
He was.
For the first time in longer than he could name, quietly and without complication, William Carter was simply, genuinely happy. And in a house that had once run on performance and fear and carefully maintained illusion, something true had taken root. Something that, tended well, and honestly, would last. Sometimes the truth is found not by the powerful, but by the ones they overlooked. And sometimes the smallest hand in the room is the one that opens the right door.